Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tracy McCarty, and I'd like to welcome you to the final session of the Cancer Screening and Prevention in Action webinar series. Today's session is skin cancer and sun safety. So we'll be talking beyond melanoma, as our title screen actually shows. So I'd like to go through a few housekeeping slides before we get started with our session today. For those of you who are joining us as attendees, if you can make sure that your full name or organization name appears in your display window, so that we have your information captured in Zoom for CE purposes. And today's session is accredited for CME, CNE, social work, and certificate of attendance. These are the disclosures that we have for today and our objectives. All important CE credit information. I'll pause here briefly if you would like to take a picture of the QR code or just take a picture of the screen. Today's code is 51LACE, LACE. The deadline to document your attendance for CEs is May 14th. You do have 1 week. And our funding sources. This project is funded by the CDC, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, with additional support from the University of Kansas Medical Center and the Masonic Cancer Alliance. And a reminder to sign up for the Kansas Cancer Partnership if you'd like to continue the work of finding out more information about cancer prevention and screening and working towards a common goal of reducing the burden of cancer in Kansas. Take a picture of the QR code to find out more about the Kansas Cancer Partnership. And here's the agenda for today's session. As you can see, we do have a packed agenda. So I am going to ask that you hold your questions until we finish at the end of the session, and we will have time to address all of your questions. And with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and introduce our first presenter, who is also moderating today's session, Dr. John Neuberger. He is Professor Emeritus for the University of Kansas Medical Center.
Thank you, Tracy. Is my screen showing up?
Yes, it is.
Great, thank you. So the name of my talk is Incidence, Mortality, Survival, and the UV Index. Just a minute. So as Tracy said, this is the fifth and the final in the series on cancer, at least for the current period of time. And the selection was based on data from the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, the Cancer Registry, and the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, and there had to be some preventive measures that could be available, and that's how all of these cancers were selected. So skin cancer is the most common cancer in the United States. As it says here from the American Cancer Society, the more people are diagnosed with skin cancer each year in the US than all other cancers combined. So I went back and I took a look at the data, the best data I could get from ACS and other sources. And it appears that there's about, in 2025, about 5.5 million skin cancer cases versus about 1.9 million other cancers. And this skin cancers, of course, is made up of basal cell, squamous cell, and melanoma, which Dr. Doolittle will talk more about later. And beneath that is ultraviolet radiation is a proven human carcinogen. This is materials from the National Toxicology Program and from the American Cancer Society and the EPA, etc. So no doubt about that. The environmental sources of UV radiation beside the sun include tanning booths, sun lamps, and mercury vapor lighting, and some fluorescent lights. But I don't plan on getting into these in particular today, maybe some other time. So some of the information from the behavioral risk factor surveillance survey talking about radiation exposure reduce the percentage of Kansans who report sunburn. That's an objective of this program, and also reduce the percentage of Kansans who use indoor tanning devices. But we're not really going to talk much about indoor tanning devices today. It's more of a regulatory issue, I think. So the percentage of adults who often use sunscreens at the time 2020 was 24%, and the target was 40%. And I got some more recent data from the health department, and this figure would be about 21.1% for adults. Still fairly low, and obviously would take time to get up to 40% going in the wrong direction. As for high school students, again from the Youth Risk Behavioral Survey, they had about 10.7 and slightly 11.3. These are always wear sunscreen, and the target was 20%, so it was slightly up, but not much. And the latest figure from 2023 has not been calculated, so we're going with 11.3. As far as indoor tanning, I believe this figure is 2.1, and this figure here is 0.8. This figure is in error, so it should be instead of 7.7, 0.8. So the Kansas Cancer Data Dashboard is fairly new, and we're going to look at that, and we're going to also look at the CDC data maps. So among females, cancer diagnosis among females from this time period here, 5 years, the female breast had the highest percent, followed by lung, and then colorectal, and then you can go on down. You see melanoma here at 5%. And when you go over to deaths, you see that lung cancer is now number one, breast is second, colorectal remains third, and there is no top 10 for melanoma. So when you calculate the number of cases using 5% times the 38,360, you come up with about 1,900 melanoma cases over a 5-year period for females. Those are the diagnoses. When you look at males, you have prostate, lung, and colorectal, and over here it's lung, prostate, colorectal. So again, you have the jump up for lung, and the other cancer just jumped down one. There is a melanoma here, but not in the mortality. So if you 6.5 times 40,000, you get about 2,600 melanoma cases. So if you look at both of them, that's 1,920. That's about 4,500 cases and deaths in the time periods that are looked. The deaths are slightly different time period. If you're interested in the percent at the U.S. level, melanoma is the sixth most common, whereas the two for females is fifth, and for males is fifth, both. So it's similar. So we'll now take a look at the data from both the CDC and the KDH&E. So for new cases, this is new cases for melanoma of the skin for the 5-year period. And you can see the dark area, dark blue is the highest quartile, and the white is the lowest quartile. When I saw this, uh, this doesn't seem right for sunlight. So I was truly puzzled about that. We can talk a little bit more about that. But Arizona seems logical, but some of these northern states don't seem quite that way. Anyways, if you look at Kansas's number, Kansas is 27.6, the actual rate. So it's at the bottom of this quartile. It's right here. It's the highest, the 41.4 is um, Utah, which again, wasn't expecting that. And Arizona is down there. So this is a bit odd. Now, you do have some low rates up here in the Northeast. So the high rate of melanoma in northern states may be the result of a number of factors, including race and ethnicity. This was both genders and all ethnic and racial groups. And I thought that was the appropriate way to look at the data since we're dealing with the whole populations. We're not just dealing with one segment at a time, we're dealing with the whole thing. So the sun's rays could be affected by reflection off snow, sand, water, and of course by elevation. The higher you are, the more UV you're going to get, and whether you participate in outdoor activities. So some of these factors could explain why northern states would have high rates if there's a lot of skiing, for example, or there's a lot of water sports, whatever. And so there's some reason, and here's a reference if you want to look that up. So here in Kansas, we have all races. Age Pacific is 27.6 per 100,000, and there's roughly 4574 cases in the 5-year period. If you look at population density, here we have incidence rate per 100,000. These are the years. You can see that rural, in general, rural rates are higher than, I'm sorry, urban rates are higher than rural rates, but there's no specific significant trend in the data going forward in time. When you do look, however, at the actual age-specific rates for the average, you can see that urban is significantly higher. The 95% confidence intervals are pretty narrow, and they don't overlap with the rural rates. So that is significantly higher in urban areas. So these are the incidents down here. If we look at female versus male, the male rates are higher, and the no specific slope going one way or the other. And when we look at, that's the p-values, and then when we look at the actual rates, you can see that male rates are significantly higher than females.
Dr. Newberger, I'll give you just a quick time check. You have just a couple more minutes.
Under mortality, we have a similar problem with the northern states being colder and having maybe more skiing, and then Kansas is actually in the third group at this time. And Idaho is the highest. So here's the Kansas rates, and there's 433 deaths. And when we look at rural versus urban, you see that there is a significant trend down for urban, but there is no significant excess for either urban or rural. And then for mortality, we look at males higher than females, and male rates is a significant downward slope, and it's also a significant increase in the rates. And here we have significant incidence for urban melanoma incidence, and mortality rates is decreasing in urban areas, and melanoma is higher in males for both incidence and mortality, but there's a decrease in the mortality rate. In survival, localized, you almost get 100%, 75%, and distance 35%. So there's a really important point there. You get early detection is important. So skin cancer rates, there were 4574 cases and 433 deaths. This is certainly not a trivial number. And the primary prevention is to avoid overexposure. And secondary prevention would be early detection. And then finally, another primary prevention would be for UV index, particularly in the season, for TV and radio stations weather forecast, including what the numbers mean, which is EPA data as well, and its important role in skin cancer prevention, and hopefully will have impact on sunscreen. I want to thank Dr. Menninger and Mr. Ismail from KDH&E to reviewing previous versions of this paper. And thank you. And that ends my conversation. And the next speaker, Michelle Bogowith with Fox 4 in Kansas City.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thanks so much for having me here. And thank you all for being here. I'm going to talk today about the UV index number. It's something that affects us all, and it's something that you might not even think of day to day that truly does affect us. Now, the UV index, it's a forecasting tool. And what it's going to do is give us critical information about ultraviolet radiation that is coming from the sun. So we are able to take that information, disseminate that information, and tell viewers at home, at least from a TV standpoint, how they can protect themselves from the sun's harmful rays, how to protect your skin, how to protect your eyes. So that's what we're here today to talk about with the UV index number. So the UV index number is a forecast for the amount of skin damaging ultraviolet radiation it is expecting to reach the Earth's surface on any given day. And that's something that we can look up, whether it is your zip code or your city or town where you live in. And we use there are several ways to get that information. Think of it this way. I guess the easiest way for me to explain it is it's like us giving a weather forecast. Instead of predicting, it's going to rain today or it's going to be sunny today, we're telling you at home how strong the sun's rays are going to be, and thus how likely it is to cause skin and eye damage. So that's what we're looking at. If we can go ahead and keep running through the slides here. We are going to do the next slide and talk about the UV index categories. Okay. So here is the scale of how they measure the UV index number. And you can see it starts with 1 and goes all the way up to 11 and beyond. So here's what those numbers mean. So the 1, the 2 in the green, those are low numbers. And those are times when you can safely enjoy being outdoors in the daytime, especially during the peak heating times of the day where the sun rays are at their strongest point. Now, typically, I can tell you this just from doing and telling folks at home daily about the UV index number for the day. These are days that are typically completely overcast. Sun is not getting through those clouds. You've got a pretty thick deck overhead. And those are typically days that sometimes also produce precipitation, whether that is rain or snow, depending upon the temperature, of course. So lower UV index rays on days that it is completely overcast and cloudy. Now, once we bump up into that moderate range, so that takes us the UV index 3 through 5, and then the high, which is the 6 to the 7. So these are times that it is wise to seek shade during those midday hours when the sun angle is at its strongest point and it's at its highest point in the sky. You can burn pretty easily. So this is when you definitely want to take the preventative measures and make sure that you are continuing to reapply sunscreen. If you are outdoors, I know that there are a lot of people who do work outside and they don't have a choice but so that is something that you need to keep in mind most definitely. Once we start to get up into the very high category or even the extreme levels, we're talking 8, 9, 10. That is when it would be wise to just completely avoid any activities outdoors during the midday. And then once we get into that 11 plus, just stay indoors. Typically when we get into that UV index number that is 11 or higher, we tend to get ozone alerts as well. So those kind of pair hand in hand, and we definitely put information out to the public to let them know it is wise to stay indoors. So in short, basically the UV index number, it's the faster your skin can get damaged in as little as 10 to 15 minutes on that higher end of the spectrum. On the lower end of the spectrum, it's much safer to actually be able to enjoy outdoors. All right, so how does the UV index number change throughout the day? We'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. Clearly, this is going to be super easy. It is lowest during nighttime, obviously when the sun is not up, or when we're at dusk or dawn, when the sun is at or below the horizon. So that is when it is at its lowest point. As the UV index rapidly starts to increase into the afternoon, as the sun starts to rise higher and higher into the sky, pending clouds, other factors, that is when we see the peak heating time of the day. Typically, we're talking 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. during daylight saving time, which is what we're in right now. So that is the dangerous part of the day with regards to the UV index number, and 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. during standard time. So it will rapidly increase once the sun is up and shining, and the UV index and the radiation is at its most intense and most dangerous point. So with that said, where can you find the information on your UV index number? So there's several ways. If we go ahead and go on to the next slide, the EPA's website is probably one of the easiest, and this is kind of cool. I have the diagrams there, so you can go into it's epa.gov/sun safety, and it'll pop up that UV index search box, and you're able to put in your city and state, or you can put in your zip code, and it will give you the information that you see there on the right side of your screen. So it gives you your UV index daily forecast. So that was, I took that from the end of April on the 21st, and you can see that number actually pretty high, UV index number of 8. And then it gives you the bell curve throughout the day. So as we go from the early morning hours into the afternoon, you can see how it peaks at that 8, and then it does start to drop off into the afternoon and evening hours. Now, you can also find the UV index number pretty much anywhere, even outside of the EPA's website. I mean, we all have phones, so you can easily see this on your weather app on your phone. A lot of those have it. Your smart watches also will have the UV index number if you scroll through on the weather apps there and other smart devices. So there's multiple ways to get this UV index number. So what affects the UV index? That's what we're going to talk about next. So as we continue on with the slides, there are several things here. And not only are they natural, but they can also be human-made factors that impact those UV levels. So let's go ahead and show you the next slide. We will start with clouds, the effect of clouds. Now, clouds can very quickly reduce, or they can also enhance UV radiation. So there's two different things here. When you have the deck of clouds, the blanket clouds, we call those stratus clouds, that are blanketing the skies, no sun is getting through, they're really thick, really heavy clouds, they are going to greatly reduce the UV radiation. So those are, again, days that we talked about on the scale that are going to be a 1, 2, maybe a 3 on the high end. But don't be deceived, because not all clouds are going to give you a reduction in UV radiation. Sometimes during summer, especially once we get into mid to late spring, early summer, it's still severe weather season around here. We get a lot of those cumulus clouds that do start to tower, and sometimes we get the big thunderstorm clouds that develop. Well, while they're towering, there's a lot of sunshine that's getting in between those clouds. You're seeing a lot of blue sky. It is reflecting off those big puffy white clouds, and then that further enhances the UV radiation for us. So at times it could really enhance it, and other times the clouds are definitely going to help reduce radiation. So regardless, it's just wise to always make sure that you are protecting your skin and your eyes. Now, the next part of this, the second thing that affects the UV index would be elevation. And I know John had alluded to this. The UV radiation is going to be stronger at those higher altitudes. There's just less atmosphere up there to scatter the sun's rays. And as you had mentioned, if you're a skier or a snowboarder, you're up in the mountains, or maybe you even enjoy mountain biking in the mountains. Because of that higher elevation, less atmosphere, there's less for those rays to get scattered by and diffused by some of those air molecules and the dust. So you're just going to simply have more radiation at those higher elevations compared to the lower elevations. And the final thing to touch on here would be air pollution. So you have dust and haze, and there's a little bit of a twist here. Okay, so because dust and haze can scatter and create sometimes less UV radiation from reaching the surface, the twist is that greenhouse gases and other pollutants, well, they can destroy the ozone. And the ozone is what helps to block that harmful UV radiation. When we have less ozone, there's more UV at the ground level. And that obviously is very, very concerning because the UV index number clearly goes up. You could burn your skin and you could have eye damage as well when we have those really, really high UV numbers. So air pollution kind of twofold here. Sometimes it helps to reduce it in some ways, but in other ways, it is going to enhance it. So let's talk quickly about the safe times to be outdoors. So early in the morning, that is probably the best chance for you to get up and get outside. Late afternoon and evening is probably going to be the second best bet as far as your safe window is concerned. Again, as we kind of mentioned earlier, that 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. is kind of the dangerous time. And you really want to try to avoid being outdoors during that peak heating time of the day, during the sun angle being straight above and at its strongest point. And if you must be, I know some people don't have that option. Just make sure that you are very, very well protected. I think another thing here is that a lot of people think, oh, it's just a summer thing. Well, you can get sunburned on a cloudy day. You can get sunburned in winter, especially if you are in those higher elevations and higher altitudes, even if you're out snowboarding when it's cold out. So it's just really smart to always just be protecting your skin, wearing that sunscreen. So to protect your skin and eyes, this is a year-round thing. I know that the UV index number during wintertime, it comes down pretty significantly as the earth starts to kind of tilt. The northern hemisphere starts to tilt away from the sun, but it still is going to send some strong rays our way. And it's always important to keep in mind that during the strongest sun angle of the day that you are finding and seeking shade, especially during those midday hours. Very important also as far as your clothing goes to wear longer sleeves. I know they make some excellent UV protective clothing nowadays. So that's always something that you can take into account, especially if you're going to be around the water, which is also a reflector and helps to burn your skin a little more quickly during the afternoons. I know pants, not necessarily an option that a lot of people opt for, especially during the hot times of the year, but that's a good way to protect your skin, maybe some light linen pants or something. And then always make sure you have a hat on, a wide brim hat preferred. And then if you are wearing a ball cap, you got to make sure, you know, your ears are protected, the tip of your nose is protected. I know that's what I always tend to see out and about, that people wear the baseball hat thinking they're protecting their face, but they forget about the tips of their ears and then the tips of their nose. Sunglasses, also a really good option to make sure that they will block 100% of UVA and UVB rays. That's super important. And then just using a broad spectrum sunscreen. These are all things that we talk about with our viewers, making sure that they are taking the necessary precautions so that they avoid sunburns and they avoid eye damage or skin cancer or that premature aging of the skin. So kind of in summary here, as we kind of wrap up at least my part of the presentation, the UV index number is going to be telling us how strong the sun's rays are going to be on any given day. The higher the number, the higher the risk, the less time it takes before skin damage starts to occur. Again, things are affected by clouds, pollution, elevation, and most definitely the time of day. So with a few simple precautions, you know, everyone is able to enjoy the great outdoors safely.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Our next speaker is Dr. Gary Doolittle, who is the Capital Federal Masonic Professor of Medicine and is a Division of Medical Oncology here at the Med Center and Medical Director of the Masonic Cancer Alliance. So, Dr. Doolittle, please begin.
Thanks, Dr. Newberger. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that has actually become my life's work. I didn't intend to be a skin cancer specialist when I became an oncologist, but over time, my career has evolved, and so has the institution where I work. And there was an expectation that we all subspecialize in a particular disease type. And I was always drawn to the care of patients with malignant melanoma. So when we all started to subspecialize here, I chose melanoma. And then more recently, the practice has evolved into skin cancers in general, because we're seeing so many more squamous cell carcinomas and basal cell carcinomas, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. I love following Michelle's talk. She hit all the most important high points for primary prevention, for protecting yourself, which is music to a skin cancer doctor's ears. So I really appreciate that. And it's all within our own grasp. These are things that we can all do relatively easily and save ourselves a little bit of grief down the line. Could I have the next slide, please? So just disclosures, I am on an advisory board for a company called Iovance. Could I have the next slide, please? I'd like to talk about the three most common forms of skin cancer and discuss risk factors for developing them. We'll talk about the treatment briefly and outline a plan for skin cancer prevention. And it's in 15 minutes. The best I can do is really cover the main highlights of the three most common causes of skin cancer and give you all some idea of prevention, but also to let you know that these are not only preventable, but they're very treatable if we're monitoring carefully. And could I have the next slide? I had to do this, right? I'm a doctor. I had to have some cross section of skin in the middle of a talk like this, right? But if you look at this slide, it really is, it's a cross section of skin, and it actually tells you the different cells that are normal, but because of damage to their DNA, they become cancerous. The basal layer of the skin is the source, and they're called basal cells, and those cells degenerate into forming a cancer called basal cell carcinoma. The top layer of skin are squamous cells, and as you can imagine, when they become cancerous, again due to DNA damage, they evolve into squamous cell carcinomas. And then malignant melanoma, of the three, the most challenging to deal with, actually come from the melanocyte layer that lies right between the outer surface of the skin, the epidermis, and the middle surface, if you will, the dermis area. So melanocytes sit in this part of the skin, running along this part of the skin. And those are cells that help your body make pigment. And if you're somebody that tans easily, you make melanin called eumelanin, and that's protective against UV radiation. If you're somebody like me, you can't tell anymore, but I used to have red hair. I don't tan easily, I burn very easily, and it's because I make a different type of melanin called pheomelanin, and it is not protective against UV radiation, ultraviolet rays, as Michelle so eloquently discussed for us. Could I have the next slide? So for basal cell carcinoma, this is the most common cause of skin cancer. And I want to talk briefly about basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma. As Dr. Newberger pointed out, they total over 5 million different cancers are diagnosed in individuals each year. And the majority of those are basal cells and squamous cells. And of the skin cancers in that 5.5 million, 85% fall into the basal cell carcinoma category. The good news is they're usually not life-threatening. they rarely metastasize, or they rarely spread from where they start to other areas of the body. It can happen, but it's in less than 0.1% of patients that develop this type of cancer. That's the good news. The challenging news is it's preventable, and it's the source of a lot of patients having to seek medical care, both from their primary care practitioner or from a dermatologist, to have these diagnosed and then removed surgically. And if we could prevent them altogether, you can prevent that headache down the line. Those big sun exposure years are from 15 to 25. And if we can really change the mindset in that phase of our lives, we can prevent wrinkles down the line. We can prevent basal cells and squamous cells. What causes them? DNA damage in these cells due to UV radiation exposure, and that can be from the sun, can also be from tanning beds. And in tanning beds, they're actually classified as Class A carcinogens. They are cancer-causing uh, uh, tanning devices. So we really discourage the use of tanning beds. Most common site for basal cell carcinoma are sun-exposed areas. So the head and neck area, arms, legs, again, those that are exposed to the sun routinely and regularly are where we see basal cells the most. Fair-skinned individuals are at higher risk because those of you that can tan produce a melanin that protects from UV radiation. But just because you can tan doesn't mean that it's going to protect you from basal cell carcinomas or basal cells. So even if you don't have to avoid sunburn like I do, you do want to avoid skin cancers later in life. And one way to do that is adequate sun protection. Just gave you just a quick shot of what a typical basal cell will look like. They often are raised, they're painless, they can have this kind of pearly look to them, can be whitish or pinkish. And while that is an easy cancer to cure with surgery, if that's left unattended and gets to a certain size, it can make the surgery quite difficult, and it can be quite difficult for a patient. Could I have the next slide, please? Next type, squamous cell carcinoma. And these, again, due to sun exposure, radiation exposure, tanning beds, as we talked about, very preventable type of cancer if we work on and we focus on sun protection. Same issue with squamous cells. It's usually sun-exposed areas, head and neck, arms, legs, back. If you spend a summer lifeguarding, it really big challenge in sun exposed areas. And I think it's important to remember that brown skinned people, black individuals are still at risk for developing skin cancers, and they still need to be screened or to be aware of that, and should still be careful about their sun exposure as well. And then I mentioned here immunosuppressed patients because we're seeing so many more squamous cell cancers in patients that have undergone some form of transplantation, a kidney transplant, liver transplant, heart. They're chronically immunosuppressed to keep the body's immune system from rejecting the organ that was transplanted. But with that immunosuppression, it puts them at much greater risk for developing squamous cell carcinomas and basal cells as well. And could I have the next slide? And then our biggest form of treatment for both of these is really surgical, and it falls within the realm of a dermatologist and primary care practitioner typically. These can be removed in the office. Depending upon the location, Mohs surgery can be applied. Mohs is a very specialized type of surgery in which a very small amount of normal skin is removed, and yet while they're doing the procedure, they are assuring that they are getting all of the cancer. So they'll remove the cancer, and then they'll keep removing shaves and borders to assure that all squamous cells or basal cell cancers have been removed. The advantage of that is you retain as much normal, healthy tissue as possible. And in the head and neck area, many of us don't want a big scar, right? Even if you have a plastic surgeon do the work, we don't want to risk scarring, and that's where Mohs can come into play and is used much more frequently now for these cancers. If these get out of control, if they're too big, or depending upon the location, we can use radiation therapy and get good responses. And immunotherapy, drugs that stimulate the body's immune cells to fight cancer first came to us in the clinic in 2011. Immunotherapy has completely revolutionized the care of skin cancer patients in this country, many other cancers besides skin, but skin cancer as well, and particularly for patients that develop malignant melanoma. And could I have the next slide? I think, one more slide, please. This just gives you an idea of what immunotherapy can do. This is a patient with basal cell carcinoma, and it is huge. Trying to remove that cancer would require an incision that circles and really removes practically all of the skin on the left half, the upper torso of the body. That's not practical. But what's really amazing to us in the clinic now with immunotherapy, we can give a drug every 3 weeks that stimulates this patient's immune cells, and those immune cells can control and put that patient in remission. It's when you see a reaction like this, when you see a response like this, it can be stunning. And I still, even at this point, I still am amazed at what these drugs can do and what immunotherapy has brought to the clinic. Could I have the next slide? I think most of us worry most about malignant melanoma, and it's by far not the most common skin cancer. It's less than 1% of all skin cancers. But the challenge with melanoma, particularly when it spreads, it can metastasize and go to multiple areas in the body, and it is the most deadly of all the skin cancers. And that's why we work so hard to get the word out about sun safety. Yes, I want to prevent the challenges that squamous cell and basal cell cancers bring to patients, but malignant melanoma is our greatest challenge in terms of mortality associated with skin cancers. Again, as I mentioned, it's that basal layer of the skin, and a melanocyte, that cell that produces melanin that gives the patient an ability to tan, that becomes cancerous. How? The same way, same mechanism as the other two. Sun exposure, UV radiation exposure that damages the cellular hardware, the cellular DNA. And with that damaged DNA, we see this abnormal growth occur. What are the risk factors for melanoma? Fair skin. So blonde hair, blue-eyed, red-haired patients, light skin, big risk factor. Family history. Some of it's because I was redheaded and have fair skin, and I come from a family in which that's prevalent. So there is this family predilection just because of coloring, but there are some genes that we inherit from our parents that put us at higher risk for developing melanoma as well. So family history of melanoma is a risk factor. Individuals that have many moles, 50 plus moles or atypical moles are at greater risk. I mentioned immunosuppressed patients, those that have undergone a transplant, or those that are born with an inadequate immune response are at risk as well. And then some genetic syndromes, a gene that is passed from parent to child can actually put you at risk for the development of this disease as well. Could I have the next slide? And you can go through the next 8. These are all pictures of malignant melanomas that part of the challenge I think we all have is we understand this whole concept, or many of us do, the ABC, we can stop there, the ABCDEs, right? A means asymmetry. So if you have a mole that lacks symmetry, like these do, that's a risky lesion that needs to be evaluated by a doctor. And then the others, border irregularity. C, color variegation. This is a really good example of a mole that has variegated color. D is diameter, so a mole that's larger than an eraser on the head of the pencil is riskier. And E, I've seen 2, it's mainly evolving. A mole that changes, a mole that's itchy, or a mole that bleeds is risky when we think in terms of melanoma. An evolving mole, an elevated mole also puts us, as physicians, as care providers, we're more worried about that when a patient presents with those types of skin moles or lesions. Could I have the next slide? So the treatment of melanoma completely turned inside out in the last 15 years. The hope is that we're all getting our skins checked regularly and that we pick up melanoma when it's at an early stage, at a stage before it has the ability to spread and metastasize. And if that happens, the treatment is primarily surgical. If the disease spreads beyond the site where it started, beyond the mole or beyond where that cancer initially occurred, surgery can be used to remove the primary site and to remove lymph nodes by that primary site. But once it's spread beyond, we need some form of systemic therapy, therapy that goes into the bloodstream and goes throughout the body to control it. And that's where immunotherapy comes on board. Prior to immunotherapy coming to the clinic, this was a universally fatal disease. Now, if you have melanoma, some of our data now show that even with widespread metastatic disease, which used to have a 5-year survival of 4 to 5%, now we're seeing a 5-year survival of 35 to 50%. And while it's not a home run, we still have a lot of work to do. There are patients that we believe are going into remission and staying there with immunotherapy. So it's a very exciting time and many new agents on the horizon to control this disease. Targeted therapy, those are drugs that go after a specific gene protein that causes abnormal growth. And in melanoma, 50% of skin cancers, skin melanomas, have a BRAF mutation that makes a protein that causes the abnormal growth. And now we have drugs that can neutralize that protein and shut the growth down. Can I have the next slide, please? Very quickly with prevention, and again, I really feel like Michelle did such a great job with this, but peak hours during the day, 10 to 4, we should try to avoid the sun. Well, that's not realistic. If those of you that had kids, those are peak hours to be out, whether it's sports or at the pool or whatever. So if we're going to be out in the sun, let's just protect ourselves, right? Sunblock. We talk about sunblock, those that actually block UV rays from getting to the skin, or sunscreens, screens that are chemically based that absorb or neutralize the radiation before it gets to the skin. Very important. I think Michelle did a great job talking about sun protective clothing. When these first came to the market, they were ridiculously expensive. It was like $60, $80 for a sun shirt or a rash guard that would protect you. Now, if you go to Target and watch these at Costco, I've seen them for $6 a piece, SPF of 50 or greater. And it's really nice to put on a rash guard or a swim shirt. You don't have to worry about reapplication of sunblock. Our biggest challenge with sunblock is remembering it. First, we got to put it on, and putting enough on, a jigger full, that's always easy for an Irishman, right? A jigger full of sunblock, and you should get yourself covered any place that's sun exposed. Check with your healthcare provider at least once a year for a skin check. Tanning beds. These cause cancer, and part of it is culturally, we still have that being tan is a sign of being attractive. And so many of us still go to tanning beds. And if we could avoid that, we can avoid the development of cancer. I love this picture because when I was a kid, I had to wear zinc oxide, which is what this little girl has on. And I thought it was the most horrible thing in the world because no one else had to. My mom would drop me off at the pool and I'd wipe it all off and then go on in. The point is now you go to the pool and people have this all over the place and no one seems to care. It's just such a positive trend. SPF of 30 or greater to protect yourself. And can we shut it down there? Because I know we still have more to discuss. Next slide is really I'm proud to be a Kansan slide, I think. Please, we'll turn it back to you, John. Or John, maybe I won't turn it back to you, and I'll actually introduce Ashley Adirante myself. Ashley is a co-worker of mine that works in the Masonic Cancer Alliance, and she's going to tell us about a primary prevention program called Pool Cool.
Yes, thank you. And Pool Cool is a program that we offer during the summer at the Masonic Cancer Alliance. It's a free evidence-based sun safety education program that's geared to aquatic staff, youth enrolled in swimming lessons, and pool patrons. It's delivered through a Train the Trainer program where myself and interns visit aquatic facilities across Kansas and the state of Missouri and teach the aquatic staff why it's important to be safe in the sun. And then they in turn can use the lesson plans from the Pool Cool program to add to their existing swimming lesson curriculum. And next slide. There are 4 rules that the Pool Cool program talks about in every lesson. First one is protect your skin, use sunscreen. Second, cover up. After swimming, cover your shoulders with a shirt and your legs with pants, shorts, or a towel. Third is when you're out in the sun, protect your eyes and face, wear sunglasses and a hat. And then the fourth one, seek shade and watch the clock. Limit your time in the sun between 10 and 4. And all of the participants of the Pool Cool program, they receive the following materials free of charge. A gallon tub of sunscreen, which can be used for staff and pool patrons. Pool Cool sunglasses that remind the staff and patrons to protect their eyes. Lip balm to protect the thin skin on their lips. Signs that they can hang around the pool that reinforce the Pool Cool message of being safe in the sun, and a leader's guide, which has all of the Pool Cool lesson plans and other fun games and activities that can be incorporated into any type of special event at the pool. Next slide. The Pool Cool program has been around in Kansas since 2014. And in that time, we have trained 13,300 aquatic staff at over 85 sites in Kansas and Western Missouri. We're always looking to expand the program. So looking at the map, if you notice that your city or town is not included, please encourage them to apply. Just by scanning the QR code, that's the application for anyone to sign up for the Pool Cool program. Next. And Pool Cool is brought free of charge to any aquatic facility thanks to our sponsors, the Outpacing Melanoma Foundation, the Masonic Cancer Alliance, and the Kansas Cancer Partnership. And last slide. And again, thank you. If you have any aquatic facility in your area that would like to sign up, please scan that QR code or email me at that email address provided. And Tracy, that's it.
Thank you, Ashley. Now we'll open this up for any questions from any members of the audience.
I've seen a couple of questions, Dr. Newberger. The first question, Ashley asked if there are cancer concerns with spray tans.
I'm going to jump in on that if it's okay, John.
Yeah, I don't know the answer.
Actually, there isn't. There's been a lot of concern about sunscreen. I make the distinction between sunscreen and sunblock. Sunblock, zinc oxide, the white that you see on people's faces, or titanium dioxide, those block UV rays. I think the question really alludes to what about the chemical blocks, because we do know that a certain of the chemical will be absorbed within the system. And to date, those that are on the market have never been shown to cause any adverse effects and any concern with what we all worry most about, I suppose, is cancer or some other toxic effect. None have been shown to do so, or they would have been pulled off the market. Having said that, many many facilities, lakes, like the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, we're asking people to use blocks as opposed to the chemical screens because of the issues related to possible toxicity to the aquatic life. So, but there's no problem with spraying. I think the bigger problem is making sure to remember to go out with it on and then reapply after you've been in the water, reapply every couple hours.
Two more, and these probably both might go to you, Dr. Doolittle. So the first person, Joanne, commented that she's hearing more from patients about how their melanoma lesion did not have any dark coloring, which makes it worrisome when trying to educate. I don't know if that's something you want to comment on.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, we do the best we can with things that are common, right? So we go through the A, B, C, D, E's of a mole. And 50% of melanomas actually arise in a pre-existing mole. But there are some melanomas that present and they're flesh tone. They don't look particularly malignant. But there was something that triggered in the practitioner's mind to do the biopsy. There was a symptom attached to it. Sometimes they hurt. Sometimes it's bleeding or itching. But you're right, Joanne. I mean, not all melanomas present in the classic look. And so some of it is really taking a careful history. If a patient comes to us and says, I don't like the look of this, I don't remember it looking like this, even if it doesn't look classic, the practitioner is more often than not going to want to biopsy that or remove it.
Next question, Dr. Doolittle, and I just pinned you because they all seem to be questions for you. How long does skin have increased sun sensitivity due to cancer treatments and medications? So like for cancer survivors, what does that usually look like?
I wish I could answer that question specifically because it's really related to the drug itself and the time frame that the patient's been on. But you raise such a good point. There are certain medications that put us at are induce a photosensitivity that we have to be careful of. And particularly, I really noticed this like in March, because there's one drug that I used to use that caused photosensitivity. And I had to really make sure I warned patients, you've got to be careful about going out in the sun. I would tell whoever asked the question to ask specifically your oncologist, or there can be other medicines that put your risk for photosensitivity. Ask specifically about that drug, and you'll get a better answer than I can give you.
And then the last was a comment, and it's a good question, but it's a good behavioral thing to think about. So Carl asked if a spray tan, so like when people put either a spray on or they go to one of those booths where they spray your whole body and it takes on the tan color. If it gives people a false sense of security related to sun sensitivity, just like a natural tan isn't really protective. If there's not, SPF being regularly reapplied, just having a spray tan is not going to give you any extra protection. And I don't know if anybody has any comments on that.
I would just say that Carl's right. Spray tan does not provide you the protection that you need. And while it may be the look that you want, you still need to block or sunscreen.
Great points. Are there any other questions? Those are all that we have from the chat now, but feel free to unmute yourself if it's easier. Sometimes it's easier to say your question than it is to type it.
We did receive one additional question in the chat. Dr. Doolittle, how common is melanoma in Asians?
That's a good question. Not as common as it is in Caucasians, but more common than in people of color, more common than brown and African Americans. Having said that, just because you're African American, Black, you're still at risk for developing melanoma. Most of the time, they're melanomas that occur on the hands and the feet, but they can occur elsewhere too. So the most famous case of that really is Bob Marley, because he had had his great toe looked at by many practitioners that told him that it was not a problem when in fact it was a melanoma that was subungular or below the toe. So we talk about risk factors, right? Fair skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, red hair, freckled individuals. But any group, any racial or ethnic group can develop this cancer.
Thank you. Ashley, I have a question for you before we end this, and that is in the Cool Pool program, do you find shaded areas around the pools, like a tent or something like that? Is that something you find in addition to the educational piece?
Yep, most of the time around the concession stand, they have a shaded area that people can go in and take a break from the sun as needed.
Okay. Well, it appears our time is up. It's 1 o'clock. I want to thank all the participants and certainly the people who are tuning in. And thank you very much for everybody. And I'll look forward to talking with you further after this program. I'll talk to some of you individually. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Just a couple of reminders as you're signing off. Tracy has the EADS code in the chat. So if you would like continuing education credit, you can find it there. You'll also get an evaluation from us. We'd love to hear your feedback to help us with planning future programs. Thank you.
Thank you.